As the conflict with Russia and Ukraine drags on, what do you think will happen with all of these yachts? Will the sanctions be dropped and ownership returned when there is a resolution of the war? Hi, welcome back to the channel. Okay, so if you've been a subscriber or a viewer of my channel for over a year, you'll know that the Q&A sessions were a regular occurrence on the channel. And since everything that's happened this year, I haven't done one. This is Q&A number 10. So if you haven't seen any of the previous ones, I'll put a link up in the top corner and you can go and check them out. They've been very popular over the years. Slight difference this time. I now have a Patreon page, so some of the first questions are going to be coming from Patreon. What do you call people? Patrons. That's right. They're going to be coming from patrons, and then later on we're going to go to some YouTube questions. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on with that, shall we? So the first question is from Brian Tinsley, and this is from Patreon. He asks, what happens on a yacht if and when the captain gets sick? Does it fall to the next in the chain of command? Does the captain just block off the bridge to others and quarantine himself there but keep working? And then the follow-up question, is there sick pay when working on a yacht, or is it no work, no pay? Okay, so if the captain gets sick, okay, so there is a chain of command. There is a second in command on board, a chief officer. They usually are already a qualified captain. Now, if the captain gets sick and he can't perform his duty, then that falls over to the chief officer usually, or there might even be a relief captain. Very often the chief officer is also the relief captain. So when the captain goes on leave, say for 2 months, the chief officer takes over, moves into his position, and he does the job for 2 months. Now, that's not always the case. But if for instance, we're talking about the vessels at sea, you don't just have the captain on the bridge. In fact, the captain depending on the size of the yacht, the captain spends little time on the bridge once they leave port. If the yacht's big enough to have enough watchkeepers, because you'll generally have 2 or 3 watchers, and then 8 till 12, 12 till 4, 4 till 8. And the watchkeepers will do one of those shifts. So they'll do 4 hours on, 8 hours off watch. So if the captain is not a watchkeeper, then it wouldn't affect the vessel. So he might be, let's say he's, I don't know, assuming we're talking about COVID here. If he's got COVID, he would go in his cabin and quarantine in his cabin, and food would be taken to his cabin and stuff. And the yacht can continue because they've got enough watchkeepers. Now, if it's a smaller boat and there's only, say, 2 watchkeepers, including the captain, then it's different because the one person cannot be a watchkeeper on his own. So, but generally, if the boat's in port, much easier. The chief officer takes over, there's daily tasks, and then that's it. But yeah, there is sick pay. If you're sick, then you'll get paid. You get paid a salary, so you'll get paid anyway. Yeah. All right. George Tomlinson, also patron. Curious as to the process of readying a yacht for repositioning. My experience is it's not so pretty. Batten down the hatches, so to speak. Not a place for owners or guests. Yeah, when a vessel is doing a transit, maybe it's doing a transatlantic or transpacific or whatever, then the vessel will be prepared for that. Deadlights go on the portholes on the lower decks, which is usually the crew cabins, which is depressing because you don't get any natural light. Also, the crew mess is usually on that deck as well. So they're all the deadlights go on, which is basically a metal thing that goes over the porthole, so you can't see in or out, but it also protects the vessel. As in terms of the interior, yeah, everything will be like anything that's liable to fall off a table will be placed on the floor. They'll put canvas sheets on the floor to protect the carpets in the guest areas, and then any like phones and remote controls or stuff that would normally sit on a table gets placed on the floor or gets they'll put cushions around it or something like that. But everything is put in a place where it won't get damaged if it gets rough. And also, generally, owners would not do that kind of trip. There probably are owners out there that do that kind of thing, but generally they will not stay on board when a boat is going into rough weather. They'll leave and they'll fly and meet it somewhere else. Or usually the owner, let's say the owner is in London and he wants his boat in the Caribbean, he's not going to get on the boat in London and travel to the Caribbean. The boat's going to get sent over to the Caribbean. When it arrives, he will fly out, join the boat, do his trip, and then he'll leave and the boat will go back to wherever he wants it to be. So it's very rare that they'll do a transit. I have been on yachts where the owner has done a transit, and there's been lots of late night calls down to the bridge asking why it's so rough and if they can do something about it. So we've got Sylvie Laflamme, also a patron. Thank you for a very interesting video on satellite antennas. In the video, we see a warning saying that the radiation extends up to 47 meters. I'm thinking of boats like the beautiful Octopus, which has the owner's quarters almost directly below. Are there protections installed in the ceilings to block the microwaves and protect the occupants? Now, Sylvie is referring to a video that I put on Patreon, which was about installation of a satellite antenna onto a ship. And there's a sticker showing that the radiation, I'll put it on screen, the radiation, it says you shouldn't go any closer than 47 meters, which is kind of tricky when you're on a yacht, when it might only be 60 meters long, right? In terms of that, that's why they're placed high up on the mast. So the radiation generally goes out, not down, but you do get closer to it. You do get quite a lot of radiation, but the decks on the vessel are very thick, and they have many layers inside. They have lots of weatherproofing and soundproofing and all that kind of stuff. And there's layers of like the soundproofing generally has a layer of aluminium over it, so they're very well protected inside the vessel. This is generally talking about when you're outside the vessel, and generally when, or what they should do, on all the yachts I've worked on, I've instructed this, the deck departments who climb up the mast to clean, they should always call and have the satellite antennas turned off before they go up there, the ones that transmit, the internet ones. They should always call the bridge and ask them to switch them off before they go up there to protect themselves from that radiation. All right, next question is Scott Runkle, and he's a patron too, and this is the most popular question on the YouTube channel as well. Very popular, and it's obviously related to what's going on right now. And he says, you talk frequently about AIS, which I understand from your videos is supposed to always be on, but fairly regularly gets turned off. What is the theoretical punishment for turning it off? Well, it's tricky. There is no set sort of fine for switching it off. That would be down to, the authorities, that even when a situation occurred where a captain was, brought in front of a court, they'd have to decide, the severity of that decision to switch it off. The captain of the vessel has the ability to switch it off if he thinks his vessel is in danger. Usually this is applied to areas like if you're going through the Gulf and you want to go to get up to Suez Canal, there's a lot of piracy in that area. So sometimes they will turn off the AIS so these pirates can't track the vessel. And that's a legitimate reason for turning it off. So it's really tricky. There are things that the captain is meant to do when he turns us off his AIS. He's meant to report it to the flag state and things like that. So it's a really tricky thing. Now, if there was an accident and it transpired that the AIS had been turned off, because it was designed literally for the prevention of collisions, a bit like the system they have on aircraft. It was specifically designed for those reasons. So if someone was to switch it off and then there was an incident, then yeah, it just depends. that incident with the vessel Utopia 4 when it hit that tanker, allegedly that tanker was not broadcasting its AIS signal. That is going through court right now. So once that final report comes out, we'll bring that to you. But I don't know whether anything will happen to the captain if it can be proven that the AIS was not functioning. Frank Ansack, this is also a patron. Can you share your best and worst crew jobs, experiences without names, details, etc.? And maybe some insights as to why they were the worst or and not your favorites, e.g. such as the people you worked with or where the yacht traveled, etc. So I think what he's asking is, are there any people, well, first part of the job is I always did the same job on board and I don't want to say what job I did, so I can't answer that part of the question. The other part is, did I ever work with anybody who wasn't very pleasant? Yes, many people. There was one particular instance where I was on a yacht, a large yacht, over 100 meters, and we had the management company sent through a rank structure, if you like, a tree of who was in which position, which was head of the departments. So obviously you've got the captain, and then it goes down to the chief officer, deck officers, etc. You've got the engineers, chief engineer goes down engineering, and then the interior department at the top of that tree, they had the purser. And when the purser on board, female, saw this, she got a massive went on a massive power drive and started to basically make life miserable for a lot of people. Now, in this particular instance, she was the direct contact with the owner on the vessel. So because of that, she had this sort of implied power over even the captain because she was communicating directly with the owner, and it was not a very good situation to be in. Everyone was treading a bit lightly around it, and she went on a complete power trip. She decided that she didn't even want to work on board anymore. She wanted to have an office somewhere on land, and she was going to be like a manager of the vessel in some sort. And to an extent, she was able to manipulate even the owner. And then, but her undoing, this went on for months. It went on for maybe a year. And her undoing was she actually hired a person to do her job on board. And she was claiming she created this position for herself. And she hired somebody to come on board to do her job. And the owner let this go on. And then as soon as that person started in the job, the owner fired the person that was on the power trip. So she basically hired her own replacement and then was fired. And it was like VE Day when she left the boat because everybody was so miserable on board because of this woman. So yeah, it was really good to get rid of her, that is. But yeah, that's one incident. You can get a person on board a yacht who can make your life miserable. It just depends on where they are in the rank structure. If they're above you, they can make your life miserable. But it's rare. It doesn't happen a lot. I've had plenty of people who are lower than me on the rank structure who've been a pain, but you can just ignore those people. This is Scott Runkle. He's a patron. I think this is his second question. Roughly how many total emails, DMs, and other communications do you receive each day or week from your viewers offering tips and info? Have you ever gotten what turned out to be a fake tip where someone was trying to pass off info, but it turned out they were intentionally lying for some reason? Yes. Okay. First of all, I get hundreds. Well, as a team, we get hundreds every week. I can't go into specifics, obviously, but we get lots and lots of information sent to us. Earlier on, when it first all kicked off in March, April time, we had so many that I had to hire people to help me go through it because I couldn't do it all myself. So we get an awful lot of tips. Have I ever gotten what turned out to be a fake tip? Yes, I have, multiple times. This is why we try to verify as best we can with every tip we get. The particular one that I'm thinking about, to me, it appeared to be, it wasn't really the area that I wanted to concentrate on. If it'd been true, then it might have been something that we might have covered, but I had a feeling it was a hit job from straight away, and yeah, so it was quite obvious that it was fake, and we just ignored it. So yeah, it does happen, and but like I said, we do our due diligence, and we always yeah, we have systems in place to verify stories before we actually run with them. Next question is from DRJ, and this is a YouTube question. As the conflict with Russia and Ukraine drags on, what do you think will happen with all of these yachts? Will the sanctions be dropped and ownership returned to these owners when there is a resolution of the war? Curious on your take. For the majority of the yachts that are currently arrested, like Dolbar, Amore Vero in France, Crescent, Scheherazade, I think they will eventually go back to their owners. The governments don't seem to be interested in trying to seize those vessels, to take the vessels from them, from their owners, in the same way that the US has. The US has, they've taken Amadea, and it's flying an American flag now, and they have their own crew on board. So yeah, so that one is most likely will never go back to the original owner. But yeah, I think apart from Amadea and also Tango, which is in Spain right now, which has also apparently been seized by the US, although nothing's happened with that vessel, they haven't tried to move it. So apart from the ones that the US have got involved with, I think all of the other boats will eventually go back to the owners, yes. See, we can't predict the future. What's happening, let's say if Putin withdrew all his troops out of Ukraine tomorrow, then yes, for sure. But if the longer it goes on, the more it becomes more unknown as to what's going to happen, if that makes sense. All right, so next question, Golden Furball, and this is a YouTube question. Isn't it dangerous that for that yacht to be transversing around the ocean without a transponder, AIS, alerting the location? I mean, a big cargo ship or something could just run into it. I think I've answered this question already. Yes, it is dangerous. Any yacht or any vessel that switches off its AIS is increasing the danger that vessel is in. But any seafarer, any navigator worth his salt can identify a vessel on the radar screen, whether or not it's broadcasting AIS. When the AIS first came out, I think the seafarers, it was a novelty, and then they were already used to using radar only. But now that seafarers are coming through where AIS is a big part of the training, I think they've become more reliant on it. And it's definitely a danger. And yeah, it shouldn't be done. I mean, there are other vessels that do it, like warships and stuff like that. They have AIS, but they are allowed to switch it off, obviously, because of what they're doing. But yeah, any navigator should be able to spot a vessel without the use of AIS. But yes, it is definitely, it's designed as an aid to navigation and to prevent collisions. So yes, they're increasing their danger. All right, Chazzy B, this is YouTube. Obviously, great patriots, why don't they just register in Russia? As they're unable to function in the world, they might as well. Now, this is a reference to the Russian owners of super yachts and why they don't register their yachts in Russia. There are a few, like the most famous one now is Motor Yacht Nord, right? It's now Russian registered. But I think the reason why they don't want to do that is because the Russian billionaires, they move their money out of Russia, so it can't be taken by certain people in power, right? So they want to move all of their assets out of Russia. So the last thing they want to do is put a Russian flag on it, because then it could be impounded by the Russian government, which is what they want to avoid. Also, there are restrictions with a Russian flagged yacht. They have to have a Russian captain and a Russian chief engineer on board. Now, the information I have about Motor Yacht Nord is I cannot verify, and I don't really want to talk about it, but they have to have, by law, a captain and a chief engineer who is a Russian citizen on board. And whether they do or not is unknown. Let's put it that way. Okay, next question. Denise Meredith. This is a YouTube question. Do you think that the super yacht owner of the yacht in Dubai watches your channel and ordered his tenders to turn off the AIS? Now, this is a reference to Motor Yacht A, because we reported that they were in Dubai and their tenders were broadcast in AIS, and then after we mentioned it on the channel, they switched them all off, and they've been switched off now for months. Yes, I don't think the owner watches, but I think somebody's watching. I mean, you've got on Motor Yacht A, you've got 45 crew, maybe 43, 45 crew. So it only takes one of those people to watch. And they'll say, oh, and then the next morning they'll go to the captain or whatever and say, hey, I saw a video on YouTube last night and they used the mistake from our point of view was to actually say that we were monitoring their tenders. So and as a result they switched them off. But 100% they switched them off after somebody saw our video. Yeah, that was a facepalm moment from my point of view. Tim Gallivan, this is YouTube again. If not payment for services is the most common reason for yacht arrest, why does it happen? These guys are rich already. Aside from the Russian sanctions issue, why do these billionaires stop paying? Well, it's a good question, isn't it? Why do they stop paying? They don't stop paying. They just take an awful long time to pay. Obviously, the owner is not getting out his credit card every time there's a bill. The management company or whoever it is he's employed to look after that vessel, they're paying the bills, right? And they can only pay the bills when they get money from the owner. So he will make transfers to that company that is paying the bills. And if he doesn't pay the money quickly enough, they can't pay the bills. So yeah, I have friends working on yachts right now who are still waiting for payments, the salary from June, and it's November. So yeah, it's crazy. You would think that people who have lots of money, you would get everything as and when, and there would be no problems. And I would say probably for the most part that is the case. Many of the yachts I've worked on, the owners have been very generous with their money. They've always been on time. They've given bonuses at the end of the year, and anything you ask for equipment-wise is usually, as long as you give a good reason for it, you'll get the equipment that you need. But there are exceptions, and those vessels sometimes get arrested because they owe fuel. Like if you refueled, obviously you're not going to pay it immediately that day. But if that money wasn't coming through, and then you go into some port in 3 months down the road, because you'll probably get a month or two to pay. But if you arrive in a port somewhere in a different country, the company that's owed money can go to the court in that country and have your vessel arrested, and the vessel won't be allowed to leave until you've paid your bill. So that's what the arrest is for. So anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. I haven't done one of these for a while, so I'm a little rusty. So please excuse me if I come across that way. I just got home to the UK yesterday or the day before yesterday, so I'm pretty tired. I've been out of the UK for a long time. Like if any of the answers to my questions made more questions for you, put those below and I'll answer them. I'll take care of them in the comments. But be sure to check out our Patreon page. This is where a lot of the questions came from. They get priority in the as the Patreon is growing. Eventually, most likely, all of the questions will come from Patreon. So if you don't want to miss out, be sure to check it out. I'll put a link in the corner here. All right, guys, thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch up with you soon. Bye-bye. So she says, still no wedding ring. Why the delay? You're over 28 years of age, aren't you? Get with it. Do your job. Are you sexually confused? So apparently, if you're 28 years or older and you're not married, you're sexually confused. So that's interesting.